This life or death piece of kit is a drone detector. It works by picking up the frequencies of drones, and the signal strength will give you an approximation of how far away they are. On our trip today, our military escort was carrying one of these. When a Russian drone is detected, it will start to beep. You will hear a lot of beeps on this film as a Russian reconnaissance drone flew over our vehicle, and then as we were pulling out, an enemy kamikaze drone close to within maybe about a mile of our vehicle as we were driving along the road. A lot of beeps. This is New York, but not the one you know. This is New York, Ukraine. And in the next 24 hours, it will find itself brutally attacked and on the brink of capture by Russian forces. It's 6:15 on a midsummer morning, and we're speeding east into the rising sun with a Ukrainian Special Reconnaissance Unit towards a small city in Donetsk Oblast that shares its name with America's Big Apple. The soundtrack to our New York journey is not provided by Sinatra, but the frantic warning beeps of a little black box. The sky is clear, save for a three-quarter moon, and the Russian target acquisition drone that is closing in on our vehicles. We're a mouse under a hawk. My palms are sweating. We don't know it yet, but we're entering Ukraine's Little Apple, only hours before the Russians break through nearby Ukrainian lines and reach the city limits. Situated no more than 2 miles from no man's land, with Russian drones and artillery scouring the city and surrounding countryside, New York has become a very dangerous place to visit. With only a few hundred of the 10,000 pre-war population left here, perhaps we will be the last Western journalists to see the town as it is right now. The Russians are attempting to take the larger town of Donetsk, only 5 miles to the north. Within a month, New York will likely have been flattened like Bakhmut, we are told by our military escort. That could prove to be a conservative estimate, as you will witness in this episode. It seems that we're here to see what life in New York looks like, on the verge of Armageddon. Our reconnaissance patrol is commanded by Lieutenant Oleg, a decorated veteran. The last time he took a patrol to New York, earlier this year, this happened. His Mitsubishi pickup was hit by 2 Russian kamikaze drones. Remarkably, he and his colleagues survived the attack and were even able to drive away. On that occasion, Oleg was not equipped with an electronic drone detector, which could have given him enough warning to take cover. On this return to New York, an important precaution is taken. The long drive into the Frontline drone zone is nerve-wracking. There is little cover, no one else on the road, and as we make the final approach to New York, our 2 vehicle convoy is picked up by a Russian drone. The drone alarm will not stop beeping until we are well on our way back to base. And we're on the edge of the village, or the town, of New York, Ukraine, which is very close to the front line. The drone detector is buzzing and buzzing again and again. It's a beautiful morning, but these blue skies are slightly worrying. We reach the outskirts of New York. No sign of life yet. We soon find out that the New Yorkers who are left are reluctant to speak to us. We spot 2 ladies, one carrying a large bunch of white hydrangeas. Oleg tries to talk to them, but they tell him they don't have time. It's the first sign that people in New York are scared.
They have no time.
Oleg, it's just like the real New York. People just don't have time to talk to you. Another man refuses. I guess the last thing that the residents want is for a military presence in their town, because you know what that will bring. So everybody we've tried to speak to so far in New York has they're either too busy or they have something else to do and they can't stop. I can't really blame them. But then we come across 77-year-old Valentina as she walks along the lane. She burst into tears when we stop to talk. She is defiant, but has had just about enough of the pressure of living in besieged New York.
Дай Бог вам здоров'я, хлопці, щоб мир у нас був, виганять їх чортової матері, щоб їх не бачили, цих росіян. Ой, Господи, як вони надоїло все.
Можемо, чому ви ще тут? Чому не виїжджаєте?
Ні, зараз ми, хлопці, зараз гуманітарку не отримуємо, тому що не привозять. От. А так, а помощь, звісно, помощь треба, хлопці. І дров немає, ні угля немає, нічого немає. Ну що це нам дають? Тонну дров і куб угля. Ой, Господи, куб дров і тонну угля. Ну що це на зиму, а? Це ж мало. Та я тут з самого початку. От, постійно тут.
Ви народилися тут?
Народилася я в Очеретині, а приїхали сюди.
А чому ви не хочете виїжджати зараз, поки війна?
Очеретина.
Ну,
Очеретина
куди
із
виїжджати?
occupied
У мене
by Russians
пенсія
right now.
маленька. Треба платити за квартиру, за все на світі. А куди?
Валентина.
То може ми вам
Як кажуть, сидіть протягнутою рукою, просить у них.
виїжджаєте в будь-яке місто України, заходите в міську раду і вас забезпечать, ви впевнений, що вас забезпечать і житлом, і буде краще, ніж тут.
Повиїжджали, поприїжджали.
Знову повертали, так?
Valentina, New York.
Скажіть, будь ласка, скільки тут ще людей залишилося? Багато чи є ще люди?
Так, тут багато людей залишилось.
Quite a lot of people are still here.
Багато.
Some physical activity.
Okay, I
А ви
understand.
далеко?
Вибачте?
Ви звідкіля?
З Англії, з Лондону.
Ой, хлопці, у вас там гарно. Дуже гарно.
London, yes.
Ну, ми так не будемо жити. Да, ось позавчора як гахнули гарно, а вчора та сама вообще чуємо, самоліт летить 2 рази, треба тікати.
А, бомбили, так?
Ну да, вони збрасують.
Yeah.
Ви знаєте, туди чи успієш, ну успієш туди пройти, ну Бог його знає, як кажуть. Вона як гахне, все і криші летять, все на світі летять.
Valentina, thank you. Thank you.
Я вам дуже дякую, хлопці, дуже дякую.
I'm very grateful to you.
Да, що,
Take care. Take
да.
care.
Бережіть себе, будь ласка.
Да.
Будьте обережні.
Я щиро, хлопці, живіть, здорові, кохайте, щоб у вас жінки були гарні, все. Ну, хороших вибирайте жінок. Зараз жінки, ох, дівчата бувають, дай Боже. Ну все, до свидання.
Дуже дякую вам, дуже дякую за розмову.
Щасливо вам,
До побачення.
хлопці. Ага.
We head downtown to the city hall.
Richard, graffiti. I love New York.
This is the Soviet-era cultural center of the city of New York, with its classical facade. There'd be maybe a library and various places of a theatre, maybe places where people could gather for entertainment and education. Obviously, that's all ended. You can hear what I guess is Donetsk just up the road being hammered by the Russian artillery. It's a beautiful day. We cross the Sloviansk to Donetsk railway track. Here is the New York police headquarters. And New York wouldn't be New York without a deli. No, I'm going to say every New York should have a bakery or a delicatessen. And this is the bakery delicatessen of this particular New York. Unfortunately, it's closed at the moment. It may be closed for some time to come. There's a lot of artillery in the background, but it certainly looks delicious. So this is Freedom Street, New York. It's quite a short road, but there are people on it. Not everybody is prepared to talk to us. There's quite a lot of understandable nervousness about the situation and the military being here. But here we are. Sitting on a bench in a small square of boarded up shops, we find Luba. She claims to be 39 years old. I'm not so sure, but living here in New York at this time would age anyone.
Давно більше вже живу.
Ну, це 20 років.
21 роки.
Більше 20 років, так? Да?
Ну нічого, нормально, живемо. Тікаємо, в хату сидимо, купляємо.
It's more or less fine.
Good for you. And do you have family here?
Чого, є, ну їхали. Не хочу виїжджати, в твою родину. Україна, ми тут живемо, не хочемо виїжджати. Ну, дом у нас, квартира. І ми живемо тут. Люди роблять, тут виновні, сторож, охранники. Завод, люди поганяли, вигнали з заводу, закрили. Все.
Luba, and could I ask a very rude question for a British person? How old are you, Luba?
39.
Що?
39. Вроде мені день рождения було.
39 років вам?
Так. Ну, апреля, 20 апреля. Було мені день рождения. От, на той факт.
Okay. Luba, thank you.
Дякую за вам за розмову.
Ну, і вам спасибо.
Бережіть себе.
Не так бережемо. Бог нам дає.
На все добре.
Nearby, we meet Hassan,
Можна вам пару питань?
thin and unkempt. He accepts a military ration pack from the soldiers and complains that he and others in New York have been abandoned. So what is it like to live in New York at this time?
Скажіть, будь ласка, як зараз вам тут живеться, як ви виживаєте?
Да ничего хорошего, плохо очень. Ничего хорошего. Капец.
А чому ви не евакуюєтеся?
А чем? Никто не забирает. Кто нас будет эвакуировать? Кому оно надо? Кто будет поезжать забирать нас?
Ну, а на попутках якось виїхати, в якийсь центр?
Денег нет.
Ні, просто на попутках, от військових попросити.
Да.
З волонтерами зв'язатися.
Кто согласится, вы что?
Чему?
Никто не соглашается. Да, я сколько вам пробовал. Да. Кому оно надо? Если бы я возможно, то что я с удовольствием, если бы найти там более нормальные условия, а не вот эта херня вот эта. Я бы с
What
удовольствием.
date the big factory closed?
Только брат бы был бы, лишь бы не тут. Мне вот это, вы думаете, мне сильно вот это надо, мне вот это гамно, оно мне нафиг не надо, мне 300 лет. Оно тут уже ничего хорошего не будет никогда.
This is Garden Street, New York. Before Stalin, it had a German name, Gartenstrasse. Okay, we are right in the center now of New York. Behind me there's a historical cultural center, and just over here is the town church. Situation is a little tense because we have a Russian UAV overhead, surveillance UAV. But otherwise it's a beautiful morning. You can see quite a bit of damage to the buildings. This never was like Manhattan. It's a small rural town of a few thousand people. There are some civilians still left here. But it's right on a hot front line next to the larger town of Donetsk, which is currently under attack by the Russians. Ground assault as well as air assault. You can hear the artillery in the background. This building was built by the Mennonite community more than a century ago and was recently restored.
So this is probably the most historic building in this New York. The equivalent of the Empire State. More artillery. Over there we have industrial New York, which has received quite a bit of damage from shelling. This is warning against mines. This piece of graffiti reads, peace to you.
Constant buzzing you can hear is Oleg's drone detector, which is really excellent.
The Big Apple has a number of famous churches, such as St. Patrick's Cathedral. New York and Donetsk has only one that we could find.
Okay, well we're now outside the main church, perhaps the only church in New York, which is behind us here. It's the Holy Spiritual Temple. It seems largely intact, although the windows in one of the towers have been blown out. And there's obviously been quite a bit of shelling inside the town here. Windows on the ground floor all boarded up, but it's got a rather beautiful garden, a rose garden. This would have once been a rather plum posting, I imagine, for some Orthodox priest, who obviously was a keen gardener. Now most of his congregation have gone, although there are still people here, we're told.
How did New York and Donetsk get its famous name? And why is it so important now? New York, Ukraine was founded in the mid-19th century. Some among those first inhabitants had lived, perhaps, in the original New York state, USA. By the end of the 1890s, the city had a large German-speaking Mennonite community. The small city prospered and became a center of both industry and culture. At one time, it possessed the third largest bookshop in the whole of the Russian Empire. But the 20th century brought problems for the Mennonites. Imperial Russia and Germany were on opposite sides in the First World War. Worse was to come when Hitler invaded the Soviet Union in 1941. Stalin had already deported the German-speaking New Yorkers to Siberia, and in 1951 changed the name of their former home from New York City, then as now the capital of Western capitalism, to New City, and so it remained for 70 years. But world events refused to leave the city in peace. In May 2014, Russian-backed separatists briefly captured New York and Donetsk. New York continued to be shelled long after it was liberated by Ukrainian forces. Almost 20 citizens were killed. The locals began to embrace their historic connection with the Big Apple. In July 2021, the city's name was officially changed back to New York. This was an act of defiance towards Russia, and Putin in particular. Since then, there's been a New York Literary Festival, and even a New York Marathon, both taking place in the depths of Donetsk Oblast.
I think we're at the gates of what is the local equivalent of Central Park. You see in the background behind me, there is a sign, a symbol, which says, "I love New York" in Ukrainian.
We hear small arms fire, which is probably the sound of soldiers trying to shoot down the loitering Russian drone that has dogged us during our visit. As we return to the German house, the church clock is striking the quarter hour, competing with the artillery. It's time for the patrol to leave. The drone alarm has not ceased beeping the whole time we've been here, nor has the sound of artillery, both outgoing and incoming. We're back in the country lane that will take us to the main highway. The drone alarm is ever more frantic. Then it tells us what we don't want to hear.
Впереди 6,5 кілометри.
The protocol in these situations is straightforward. If we are the target of a kamikaze drone, the driver steers into the nearest hedge or tree line. We bail out and scatter.
Впереди 3,5 кілометри від нас.
But the kamikaze doesn't get any closer. We reach the empty highway and turn for home, still 20 kilometers without cover away. Shamefully, I'm grateful when a military vehicle passes us going the other way. Better they are targets than us. "36 hours, 400 miles and 10 hours driving later, we're back in Kyiv. But then comes shocking news. The day after we left, a huge Russian glide bomb hit New York, killing 4 people and wounding 3. The pictures remind me of that terrible day when the original New York was struck more than 2 decades ago. But this was just the start. Days later, the Russians punched through the Ukrainian front line and advanced to within a field's width of the edge of New York. I was told that the Kremlin will take particular pleasure in destroying or capturing the Ukrainian town that shares the name of America's greatest city. That could happen at any time now. The battle for New York has begun.